Before she was a novelist, a journalist, or a professor, Sonora Jha found her world inside words.
And it was my father that noticed that I loved to write and encouraged me to write. And at the age of 18, I had a little essay published in the Times of India. When I went into journalism, that for me, because it was like an awakening of my mind and something that I felt like, oh my gosh, this exists and I can tell stories about people and I can write and put words together and sentences together. That became just beautiful.
I'm driven by social justice issues, right? I'm driven by something in society that feels wrong or unjust. And then there's a story that sort of is around that issue. And I'm drawn to that, getting to the heart of that, feeling the heartbeat of that issue, but humanizing it in terms of people. Like, what does it mean for people?
In her acclaimed debut novel, Foreign, Jha weaves a narrative that crosses borders. A story of mothers, sons, and the pull between home and elsewhere. Her next work, How to Raise a Feminist Son, blends memoir, cultural critique, and hope. A call to raise a new generation shaped by empathy and equality.
The book is as much about raising a feminist son as it is about living a feminist life. So I think it really starts with living a feminist life, So as a mother, I was living less of a self-sacrificing mother role and more of a self-actualizing mother. And so that just became my way of being around my son.
With the laughter, she probed the fault lines of privilege, race, and the modern university campus, earning the Washington State Book Award and glowing recognition from critics. And her latest novel, Intemperance, called by Susan Orlean gorgeous, witty, sexy, and smart. Jha writes like a dream, and this book will delight you. Which Publishers Weekly called a fresh and sassy take on romantic comedy conventions. Tonight, we are honored to host Sonora Jha in conversation with author and Spokesman-Review columnist Cindy Hval. Please welcome them both to the Northwest Passages stage.
Thank you. How many of you have read Intemperance already? Wow. So I want to know how much to spoil and how much not to spoil as we go on. I just want you to know, Sonora, it's a major privilege to meet you. And I feel like of all of the wonderful writers we have at the Spokesman-Review, I happen to be a little bit uniquely qualified to interview you, as I'm pretty sure there are no other menopausal midlife women currently on staff or freelancing. So I won't take that as an insult. I take that as a compliment. Thank you. And I also, to prove my credentials, typed out my question in 16-point font. And if you know, you know. And I brought cheaters just in case. So I'm prepared.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, you don't have to read it. That's why you love it. You can sit there. So I want to thank you for creating this marvelous protagonist who just happens to be incredibly sexy, in tune with herself, right all the way through menopause, a very relatable and well-rounded, in every way, character. But my first question is, why does she not have a name?
Oh, that's lovely. My first response is to thank you for doing this incredible job of putting together questions, reading. I was just telling Cindy that it's the harder job to actually prepare and read and, come up with questions and then try and make the author look smart. So thank you for doing that tonight. And thank you for this incredible evening. I mean, I had never seen this video before, and I was just like, oh my goodness. And my name and my picture across the street on a wall, and I was just like, I am going to get this.
You have arrived.
I know, I really have. I'll never get this again, anyone. So I'm enjoying every moment of it. And thank you all for being here for this conversation. Why I didn't give her a name. So when I started writing the book, I was thinking I will give her a name eventually. There's no name that's coming to me right now. She's drawn from so much of me, and I was like, if I just give her a name with S, that'll be that. In a way, it's more exposing of me. In a way, it's more of an association with me. And then, as I went along, I realized this is every woman. It's every woman in different parts of her life. It's every woman in different aspirations of her life, different desires in her life. And I just want a reader to plug their name in, which is not to say that the book is only for women, but if someone's imagining themselves in the head of the protagonist, in the life of the protagonist, I want them to insert their name in there. So I just left it without a name. And then, actually, when I turned in my first draft of the book, I read Miranda July's All Fours, which is a hugely popular book and a beautiful book. And she doesn't have a name for her protagonist either. And I was like, I think there's something going on in literature. There's something in the air where it's like we're letting women be nameless, but sort of like take up a lot of space anyway.
Well, this character takes up a lot of space, and I love that about her. Wherever she goes, she owns the space that she's in, and especially for women of a certain age, that can be more difficult, even though we have so much more to offer than probably our 20-something selves did. So I really appreciated the space that you allowed her to take up. So there's your book, The Laughter, I told you I just loved so much because my son is a college English instructor. And if you haven't read The Laughter and you know anything about academia, you will immediately fall into it. And the twists and turns, I love being surprised. And it was well-earned Washington State Book Award winner. But Intemperance, to follow up with, is a very different book and a very different storyline. So where was your inspiration for Intemperance?
Yeah.
And how is it? We can tell how it's different, but are there ways that it's similar to The Laughter?
Oh, that's a really good question. So part of it was a response to writing The Laughter, because I was, The Laughter is somewhat of it's got dark humor, and it's a sort of unreliable, almost sinister narrator, protagonist. And I was just so tired of being in his head for so many years.
I don't blame you.
Right? And I was thinking I wanted to create a character that was someone very different from him, and a story that had so much more joy in it and so much more intemperance in it. And in a way, Oliver Harding, who's the protagonist of The Laughter, is very intemperate. And I was like, what if we claim this intemperance and give it to a woman who is not expected to be intemperate, right? You would not expect an Indian woman living in Seattle, an immigrant, middle-aged, and all the other things that she is, to have intemperance, to be sort of a little bit, quirky and taking up all the space and living her own life. So part of that was what drove Intemperance and this character. And the other thing was that, as I mentioned, she's sort of drawn from my own self and my own life circumstances, but she is not me. And a lot of the things that have happened to her in the novel are definitely not me. And I was telling my colleagues, she's a sociology professor and I'm a journalism professor, so that's completely different. And so it's not me. But I wanted to create a character that has similar life circumstances, twice divorced, single mother, immigrant, several other things going on in there. But to take those and sort of run with it and do, what if I free her on the page the way I won't free myself,
Well, you just took my next question, which is a list of all of these things that this character is that make it difficult for her to find true love when she decides she wants to marry again after being twice divorced. And I found her struggle with being a feminist and published academic on the subject of sociology, and men feeling that she might be shamed by her feminist friends for being so out there in this quest for true love. I thought that was really brave to write about the response of this character. So what kind of response have you had from fellow readers about this very seeking a heterosexual marriage at 50, almost 55.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that menopause does is make you reckless. And so I'm just like, let's be reckless with writing this book. And
Don't
what's
say
the
anything,
worst?
Derek.
I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Feminists will cancel me. That's okay. I have tenure. I have tenure at my university job. So I was like, yes. Right? But jokes aside, I think one of the things for me was this question. I mean, I do start with a question and an idea that I want to explore in the story. And the big question for me was, what about love? Where does love come in after the gender politics are discussed over and over again, and desire and sexuality? Where does that all come in? And is marriage still a place where one can nurture and grow love? And so she is twice divorced. She's left these two husbands, but it may be because she truly believes in love. And I'm a romantic, and I felt like this kind of woman does exist, who believes so much in love that she leaves men, but she wants to improve her ways, and so she decides to go for a third marriage. And so it was a way to explore marriage, but also to sort of reverse the marriage plot, which is the quest of a lot of novels, right? A lot of love stories are about who's going to be the husband, it's the Mr. Darcy, and which all those things that we love, of course, but I wanted to take that marriage plot and subvert it a little bit and mess with it and say, well, it's not necessarily about how she picks the husband or where the marriage plot goes, but about her journey and the questions that are coming up for her and for others as she explores that. So in terms of the response that it's had, I was relieved to see Ms. Magazine has given it a rave review, and Bust, and so the younger feminists as well. So it's like, okay, this middle-aged woman exploring heterosexual marriage is fine. Like, she's also a feminist.
So in addition to this character being in midlife, twice divorced, highly educated academic, looking for love, she also deals with post-polio syndrome and the limp and the pain that you graphically describe that she deals with. And just when you're reading the book, for me, I'm like, really, one more thing? Does she need to have one more thing? So, and then that becomes a big part of the plot, the documentary, going to film this woman from the point of, disabled. And I'm wondering, why did you choose to include that with all of the other things in this character? Yeah,
and as I said, she's drawn from me. So I have post-polio syndrome, which is a new thing that I learned. So I got polio when I was a child. I grew up in India, was born and raised there, and I was about a year old. So it was only recently eradicated in India. It's, of course, been eradicated from the US a while ago, which is why a lot of the medical establishment here is like fascinated when I go in and I say that I have this. And then there's post-polio syndrome, which is a pretty sad thing that adults later in life who've had polio as children start to see some of the effects again. So I've been dealing with that in the past few years, and I felt like one was there's also a lot of internalized ableism that I struggle with growing up and being told, hide it, don't show your disability, don't show your vulnerability. And I was like, I'm just going to explode that. I'm just going to go for it and make this character have this disability and struggle with this, but also in a response to the lack in literature of disability narratives or disability literature. There's a resurgence of that, or a surge in that now. And I felt like I wanted to speak into that with this woman who is actually becoming more confident as she is becoming more disabled. There's like a shedding of the trappings of visibility and invisibility, and the trappings of being a beautiful woman and always looking well put together. And she's like, the hell with it. I am going to use my cane and walk around with a cane, and I'm going to struggle through my physicality, but I'm also going to feel beautiful as, never before.
Well, you've talked about your career and being tenured. So you teach journalism at Seattle University and has spent a career in journalism, bringing you here to the States. I understand that's what brought you. So how does your background as a journalist inform your novel writing and your fiction writing, or does it?
It does. It actually came as a big surprise to me that I wanted to actually write fiction. It was always a dream. Like, growing up in India, it's a very strong literary culture and, believes in reading a lot of literary fiction. And so there was always like a deference given to authors and to writers. And I grew up with that deference and thinking like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. People write fiction, people write novels. That would be a great thing to do maybe one day, right? But then I, throw myself into journalism because I also needed a paycheck. And so, and then become an academic. And each one takes you further and further away from deeply creative writing. Journalists in the audience, please don't kill me for saying this, but I thought I knew how to write fiction, but I really didn't. As a journalist, I felt like, oh, everyone always says I write well, but there's a whole different set of norms, right? And so I think what happened was with the first novel, Foreign, there were farmers that were dying by suicide in India by hundreds of thousands. And I felt like this was such a huge journalistic story about globalization and the impact of seeds and climate change and so many things. And it wasn't being covered in journalism or, in India or elsewhere. And I went to India to these farmers' families to talk to people in these villages and met a lot of farming widows. And they were telling me their stories in these really compelling, lyrical sort of ways. And they were telling me truths that they were saying, please don't put that in anything that you write. And I was like, how do I do this? As an academic and as a journalist, how do I serve this story where I can tell their truth, but not have them feel exposed, And so I actually came across this amazing quote by Albert Camus that said, fiction is a lie we tell in order to get to the truth. And that just felt so accurate for what I was feeling as a journalist. And so I took the same curiosity that a journalist has, right? And we teach students, we were talking about high school students and journalism. I teach students about, be curious, ask questions all the time, like train yourself into curiosity. And so that has really served me well, to answer your question in this long-winded way. That's really served me well in the work that I do. So with everything that I've written, it starts with a lot of research, a lot of talking to people, and then going to the page and saying, how do I build a compelling fictional narrative from here?
So talking about fictional narrative, Intemperance took an unexpected turn for me with you do a pretty deep dive into Hindu mysticism and mythology, and I wasn't expecting that because I just read it cold. I don't like to know too much, especially with a novel. You want to get into it. But you have the revelation of a family curse and all of these things that come in. So why and how did you choose to include those elements, and was that difficult for you to weave in and out of the contemporary setting, and then to go back into the mythology and into the family history of your character?
Are you sure you're not a fiction writer? Because it's
not
difficult.
Yet.
Because you're right, it is difficult to, by figuring out where to place it so that the reader doesn't get, you don't lose the reader at any point because they're following a certain narrative and then you take this turn into something else. I think part of it was I was thinking about how those of us that are immigrants, right? Like we come here, we make a place of our own, we build community, we become American, and we make this our home, and yet we are shaped by so much in our ancestry, right? This is true for everyone and anyone that moves anywhere in the world, that we didn't just land here and only assimilate and start becoming American, right? And there's so much else that has shaped us, that has that's in our songs. Like you were listening to the soundtrack and that was playing here, and it's Indian films and Hindi songs, and that's always playing in my mind. And in India, mythology and Hindu goddesses and gods are always around you. You're talking about it all the time, and there's so much going on. There's so much of our conversations that are drawn from the idiom of all of that mythology. And I felt like, who is this woman? Where did she get this intemperance from? Where does she get this kind of sense of largeness from? And where does she get this idea of a Swayamvar, this event that she's going to have, where she's going to make men perform feats in order to compete for her hand in marriage? And so that was drawn from Hindu mythology. There's some of that in Western fairy tales as well, where the king would send out a call, far and wide, and get men to come and compete and have perform a feat of will or strength to win a princess's hand. And so I felt like this is no princess, but she is going to do this. And so that was a great way to sort of go into mythology. But also there's a cousin from India that's writing to her and saying, you should not be doing this. All kinds of curses will befall you, as has happened in our family. And so she's trying to shut him off, but realizes that a lot of those curses were actually blessings. Is that a spoiler? Maybe in a way. But yes, she realizes that intemperance of spirit is not a bad thing, and what may seem as a curse could actually be a blessing.
Well, now we have to talk about the Swayamvar. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Google told me how to pronounce it 3 different ways, which isn't really helpful. So I trust you, the author. So the whole novel is building to this event, and all of these things go back and forth. The audacity of a 54-year-old, almost 55-year-old, twice divorced woman to hold this big event where men will sign up to compete for her hand in marriage after completing feats of her choosing. I mean, I just couldn't turn the pages fast enough, because she's deciding with her best friend and with a son and some other people, what will these feats be? And I was totally invested as a reader, saying, what in the year 2024 or whatever you wrote it, what feats would they be? So for me, that was so compelling, and I loved how you led all the way up to the end. It was so refreshing. I know this event is based on Hindu mythology, but wouldn't it be kind of great if we could bring it back in Western way too?
Let's do it.
Is that cultural appropriation? I don't know.
No.
But
I give you permission to have Swayamvars. I give you permission to do it. No
you
cultural
heard it
appropriation.
Here. I mean, do you think it's possible to resurrect the idea?
I love it.
We
should do it. And some of you can leave your husbands and have a Swayamvar now. You can. So
let's talk about the feats, because I had a lot of good talks with my girlfriends about, say, I'm happily married of 40 years, and I pray to God I get another 20, so I don't need this feat for myself. But I do have some single girlfriends, and we talked about, what would you choose if you were this character? And you'll have to read the book if you haven't to find out what she chooses. But as an author, I know there must have been some, when you're writing the book, some feats that you thought, nope, and you winnow them out till the final ones. For me, I would have definitely had tub scrubbing and bathroom cleaning involved. Because really, there's no sexier thing than seeing your husband scrub a shower. And if you haven't experienced that, I'm so sorry. There's still time. Or paying someone to do it, too. But I would love to know, what kind of feats did you decide not to use? And how did these final become the compelling denouement of the novel?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so funny, because I was like, this is a book about the feats. I need to focus. And it was actually called The Feat before I came up with the word intemperance. So it was like, okay, the feat. And then I realized it's not necessarily about that's not the central question, even though it is the question that's driving the plot, right? But I was having so much fun, and I was getting really afraid, because I was like, I'm writing chapter after chapter, and this woman hasn't figured out what the feats are going to be, because I haven't figured out what the feats are going to be.
I was waiting.
Right, yeah. And so and when I would tell anyone, oh, this is the novel I'm working on, they would say, ooh, I know what the feat should be. And everyone had an opinion on this, right? And so, like you, there were so many people like, he should cook. Like, there should be a cooking contest. And I was like, both my ex-husbands were great cooks.
Oh.
It wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was like, not cooking. I can always order in. And then the cleaning, you're right, you can hire someone. I was like, what is something that would be amazing for her to have that you cannot hire someone, you cannot make a call? Like,
Yes.
I don't even need a ride to the airport now because I can get a lift.
Uber.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, men are getting irrelevant, right, rapidly. Sorry, I'm kidding.
Not if they clean showers.
Exactly. And I'm joking, right? I've raised a young man, and I hope he's not getting irrelevant. I hope the world loves him.
Yes.
So for me, really it was like an exploration of love. Like, after all these needs and all the traditional reasons to marry and stay married and have a husband have been almost dispensed with, right? All the reasons why people would say, oh, don't leave him because, or you should get married by so and so age because, right? Once all that has been dispensed with, what lies at the bottom for me really is love. Is like so it's really it actually is about the feat that she ends up having to perform in order to believe in the tenderness of love. And she doesn't realize that the feat is really for her to perform in a way. And so when she does come up with a set of feats, she decides she's going to have multiple feats for men, some of them big and some of them small, that they're really for her to find that one person that for whom she can show up and who can show up for her in ways that matter now.
And I won't give it away, but I mean, someone does complete all of them. And so that leads me to the next question. When I closed the final page, I wanted more, which is what all the best novels do. They're not usually tied up in a bow because I want to know what happens next. So she finds her person, and at the end of the event, the whole goal is they are going to marry that day. So it's not just a dating thing. It's like, nope, you do this, this, and this, and then I pick you, and there's actually a wedding ceremony and a wedding dress, and I want to know what happens next. So is there a sequel coming?
I don't know what happens next, So maybe one day I'll write a sequel, but no, now I want to write something dark again.
Oh.
So yeah.
Any little teasers about what you might?
No. There's some glimmers of something, and I'm at
Not ready yet.
like noodling around stage, and in journalism it's considered the noodling around, asking questions, talking to people stage. So nothing firm that's happening yet.
Well, wonderful. I do have to say I love a happy ending, and I was a little bit worried because social media plays a huge part in this book, and the judgments that women can come under when you live a life that's no longer quite so private. And I know that I felt like the character dealt with that in various ways, but came out on top, which I think is so encouraging. So it had a hopeful ending, and is that exactly what you wanted after writing The Laughter?
That is, and actually I was thinking about, like, what if I give it a disappointing ending and like not a happy ending, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. So, but I'm not giving away what the ending is exactly. But maybe she finds someone. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe we'll see.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing this book with us, and I know we have some time for questions and answers that are not from me, so I will let Christy do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So great. Thank you.
Scanning for questions, otherwise I'll start with mine. Oh, good. All right, we'll see if you have my question. Here you go.
What was your puppy's name in the picture when you were holding the puppy?
Oh, was there one with oh my gosh, that little puppy when I was a kid? Because I have a dog now, but that was Topsy.
Topsy.
Yeah. And my parents said Topsy ran away, but I have a feeling something else may have happened. Yeah, Topsy ran away.
I have a question about the cover. I've seen this cover, and also because I follow you on social media, I've seen the release of the Indian cover as well. But how did this particular beautiful piece of art come to pass to be your book cover?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Covers can go horribly wrong, and very often authors don't get a say in their covers, but I'm so lucky that my publisher ran 4 covers by me, and there were 2 that were sort of in the running for the final cover, and I picked the other one actually, and then I was like, okay, so this is decided, this is the cover, and then I kept returning to this one and looking at it, and I was like, oh, there's a reason I keep going back, because I don't want to let it go, and I was like, I think this is going to be it, and especially when they told me what this is. So this is, some of you may know this painting. It's by an artist, Hilma af Klint, who is a Swedish feminist queer woman artist in the late 19th century. And she was mystical. She did some mystical things, and these are swans. And the book has a lot of swan imagery and swans showing up in the book, and so it just fit that theme so perfectly. Also, the intemperance and the temperance and the intemperance, darkness and light, love, or is that the opposite of love? Whatever that is it hate? I don't know. So I just felt like there was something about that just fit really well, and I was so happy that they could get this amazing painting for the cover.
Here we go. Megan Dine. Here in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, Megan is one of the writers that does our author profiles.
Okay. Thank you, Christy. Since reading your book, the narrator, the unnamed narrator, she's very sort of infectious and persuasive. And I've found myself becoming a little intemperate since being in her mind for so long. And I'm wondering, since she's so strongly based on you, but just makes decisions differently than you would, if you've been experiencing any intemperance.
I love that. And Megan did a beautiful interview of me in the paper, so thank you for that. Such a beautifully generous interview. I feel like, she's far more unhinged, right? Like, I don't get to be unhinged in the way she is. She's making taking a lot of risks and sort of blundering around a little bit, and I'm like, no, I know I have tenure, but I'm not going to go that far. But I do think, with the disability thing, for instance, she uses a cane, and she is very visibly disabled, and I feel like, in a way, it's freed me. And I felt like, why can't I be more like her? Like, when am I going to shed some of my, learned and, things that I was taught as a little girl? When can I, shed that? So in that way, I have. And I think I'm also a little more outspoken now after writing the book. So I want to be more like my protagonist. So yeah, I think in a way, I'm learning from this creature that I created. Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be harder for you to go back to teaching now that you've been on book tour?
No, I think I'm aching for it. Yeah. My students, the students will always get you to not take yourself too seriously. I think I need that, especially after that screen on the wall outside.
We can put that up. That could be your new profile photo. Anything over in this section? Don't be shy. Got that? Well, right here.
I was just wondering what your son's reaction was to the book.
Oh, that's a great question. So my son is always my first reader and editor. He's a really good editor if anyone's ever looking for a good editor. So I raised him that way. I tell him, you're welcome, son. He's an avid reader, and so I have him read my books before, I go into the second draft, and he really loved it. And, there's some sex in the book, and so I was like, I don't know whether to show you this one. And then he was like, let me read it. And I was like, just so you know, none of the things in this book actually happened with me. It's not me. And he was like, he had the sweetest response. He's a young man now, and he was like, Mama, this is art. I'm going to read it as art, so you don't have to worry. And I was just like, that's so nice. And so he was actually the one that encouraged me, because I was like, should I put in all this stuff from her ancestry and the mystical things? And it feels like a little bit of a detour and figuring out where to place it in the novel and things. And he said, well, without those things, this is just an Indian Sex and the City. Oh. And I was like, and there's nothing wrong if one wants to write an Indian Sex and the City, but I was like, you know what? You're right. I'll keep this in there. So.
He is a good editor.
Yeah, it's like.
How fun was that?
Thank you.
A great time.
Thank you.